Now, this force isn't about some magical power that's pulled from within you. The capital U stands for the subtle universal force that's generated when two or more people come together. This is a social equation. And what it does is it formulates three different keys that comprise Aristotle's principle that the whole is greater than a sum of the parts when people work together towards a common cause. It can't be quantified into a number, but everybody knows that when you work with others, it gets a lot easier. And the more people that are working on a project, that also increases the probability that it's going to succeed. So the formulation that that you saw there is the components, like I said, and this is set between your head, your heart, and your soul for that social part of the process. The most important, the first thing that you've got to have for something new, for a collective together, your head has to decide to participate. It's the reason that they're winning and we're losing. These people on top are working together to scheme and plan, while we, the people, we're being completely divided. We are not working together. We're closer together than ever and never farther apart. Everybody's isolated. You're not in groups. People are more lonely and depressed. But if we can participate and work together, we can help on this force. One of the main reasons we're also not participating is because of this second component in your heart, and that's the trust, guys. We don't trust each other. The trust is undoubtedly lacking, and it's inhibiting the participation in the process. You've got to have the courage to trust somebody, to try something new. You've got to be receptive to the possibility of participating in something new, in this new opportunity that I'm putting together for you. And that tilde, this is the activator of the process. There's a couple versions of that, as you can see here. This activator right now, it's mostly anger. That's the biggest thing that's bringing people together in large numbers now, is the conflict and protest, war, and all of these things that are generated by the anger that gets people active, gets them doing something, trying to make a change, and it certainly generates some serious energy. But it's the wrong way to do it when it comes to the masses, and basically the mediator on that that's required. That's compromise. With this process, when it's anger that's getting people together, it's dividing things. That compromise is not happening. That's why it's very difficult to resolve these conflicts. That's why Congress never gets anything done. They don't compromise on anything to create a collective. But if you can shift to this version of the force, that power with participation, again, in both of these is amplified. It's squared on that. But instead of the lower case, with a lower level of trust, in this situation where it's the anger that's bringing people together, if you're deciding on this second stage, it's a capitalized T. It's more trust between the people, because the activator isn't anger for your soul to experience it. It's adventure. If you can make life an adventure, believe me, just imagine if your life was an adventure rather than just a 9 to 5. So what that does, instead of dividing things as far as compromise, when you do compromise, when people work together in a common cause, when they're having fun doing it, when they're trusting, the trust is building. They had the courage to get started. For this activator, there's politics. Whether it's you and your spouse or between countries. Either way. But if people are working together, then that compromise that they're developing is helping to help with the communication, and it's accelerating the process. And then finally, if you can capitalize that for the participation, once that tops 50% of the population, once you get over that, I've set it up that the power is cubed, because once everybody's noticing that the majority are participating, then that increases the activation. More and more people are going to get involved in the process. And again, with everything that we keep accomplishing, with the goals that we've completed, once we find a way to compromise and solve some of these complications, the more that we're able to accomplish, the easier things are going to get to progress from there. And those are the three keys that I've put together for the FoUrce. There are other components in relation to them, but we'll cover those later. The PLUS principle is a visual classification system, and it allows a quick analysis of the core qualities of any new invention, any idea, so that without knowing the specifics on a product, you can gauge the potential value. Come on, Harry, it's just a few letters.
Actually, I'm highly logical, which allows me to look past extraneous detail and perceive clearly that which others overlook.
You don't need the details on everything that you're working on. You need to find out whether it's worth doing to begin with, and that starts with whether something's just possible. Is that the case? If it's plusable, it's possible. And remember, guys, anything that's possible is actually possible. Everybody's got their own ideas, their $1 million idea, this or that. But a lot of that stuff just gets dropped for two reasons. First of all, is it probable? That's the problem most people have. When they look at the probability of a new possibility, if they think that probability is low, then oftentimes we just dismiss it as impossible, even though that's not the case. When it comes to being a write-in president of the United States, is that possible? Of course it is. All people have to do is, instead of clicking on Clinton or Trump, they just write in Kevin Thorne. Is that probable? Not really. not to start with. We don't know how far out this video is going to get and how many people are gonna notice. That's what matters to start with. Is your idea profitable? What's that really worth? Well, I think if it's able to help develop the world's first direct democracy, I think that's pretty valuable. And then finally, is it a practical approach? Well, it's pretty obvious that our objectives on just hiring these corrupt politicians has not been practical. They always claim to be able to do this or that, but they just don't do it. They work for other people. I'm going to be optimistic on that too. Is it logical? It's a logical approach. It's been available at any time, but typically just seen as not successful. But that's a logical way to work it to get somebody else in, rather than being presented with only two options out there. Is it legal? Absolutely. Anybody can do it. Is it unique? Yeah, it's never happened before for president. Is it universal? That's also another factor. Yeah, I think so. I think people are going to definitely notice, no doubt about that. And if we can take the first step of getting someone outside of the political system at a high position of power, then we can start to make some real differences. And then how simple is that on the high or low scale? I mean, it's relatively simple. You know, I'll give it a 7 on there. Um, but I mean, again, it only takes around 75 million votes to do it, so that's not that complicated, right? Uh, the plus ability on the Courier Congress. Um, yes, it's possible. A practical approach. The possibilities on it. I'll give it a 5. For contacting all those people and getting so much information out there. Well, if my friends on Facebook just tell a friend to tell their friends, guys, that's already 40 million people. That's what allows for so much more participation now in anything out there. And believe me, guys, if we can take control instead of politicians signing bills that are written by corporations, if we can actually make the rules, if we're the ones who are making those decisions, I think that's incredibly profitable for us to finally make some changes. And then the practical approach, yeah, it's definitely I think it's probably the only way to do it, really. There's never been anything like it. There's been a couple similar concepts for representation, but it is a practical approach that we can definitely make happen. It's logical. Putting in couriers that are just presenting what we're actually making happen. This next video, the UPA is going to explain how that works, but it's a perfectly logical approach that you'll understand. It's legal to do. They can't stop us from working with some outside force. Again, you'll see how that works. There are well, Switzerland's the only thing that's called a direct democracy at the moment, so it's pretty unique out there. But they really don't. They just vote 4 times a year. It's not actually the case. So this is it universal? Halfway. About half the countries on the planet are democracies. This technique is universal for any democracy to implement. All of those are having elections in the next 1 to 3 years as well. So instead of just the United People of America, my vision is eventually the United People of Earth. What can we do with that? Simplicity there? No, not really. This one's a lot more. It's more difficult to implement because of the different steps we've got to take to get the couriers in place to begin with. But again, like I said, watch the next video to see how we'll initiate that process. Oh, and one thing I forgot to mention, again, this is tied in also with the activation of the force that amplifies your probability on any possibility. Why? Because if people are participating, not just with numbers of the people that are working with it, but also participation between the materials that are required, supplies, and then participation with money. That idea that you've had. Well, maybe you thought the probability was low because you didn't have what it took to create it. But what could you do if you had, if you had 50 employees and $500,000? Then what could you do? Pretty much anything you've got in mind, probably. It's just the right participation. And when people are focused on that concept and working together, again, it significantly increases the probability on it happening. And as far as America goes, guys, what do you think you could do with 24 million employees and $3.6 trillion? Guys, I think we can do a lot better than what we're doing right now. No doubt about that. Except, especially if we can get the force activated, get the people involved, get 150 million Americans working to make a difference and make some real changes for a change.